This is technical training number 1, and this is the first of 7 meetings that are going to occur throughout the next 7 weeks, all at the same time, same place. If you don't attend the session for whatever reason, even if you do attend the session, you're going to automatically get emailed a recording of the session. So you don't need to ask us for that. I think it takes, I don't know, maybe 24 hours for it to get emailed out or something. It might be faster than that. But you will get emailed a link to a recording of the session. So what we're talking about today is just some general information on how TouchStone's organized. I'm going to talk a little bit about this dashboard screen and what's here and how it's used. And mostly we're going to focus on the 4 key functions, which is over here. So that's session number 1 today. So this is called the dashboard, what you're looking at now. And when you log into TouchStone, this is the first thing you're always going to see. The dashboard contains tools in it that help you to use your processes and manage them. So the control panel feature right here allows employees and yourselves, if you are employees or not, the ability to access the processes that you're responsible for. So once control panels have been set up like this one, when you select it, it takes you to a list of your processes, the processes that you're responsible for in this position, which is listed, whatever you have a control panel for. So these are all processes that I'm responsible for as the manager of marketing and sales. Through the control panel, I can select a process, and here I'm seeing all the documentation that was created in this process. So I can see work plans and a step-by-step for how to do a performance evaluation. I can see a checklist that I might be responsible for completing within it. I can see files and forms that have been uploaded, documents, forms I have to fill out. So within this, when a tool that needs to be completed is selected like this one, I can then go and fill this out and then save it back to TouchStone. There will be a whole technical training series on how to use the control panel in management review. But I just want everyone who is not aware currently to understand what this is really about. It's about the using, the implementing, the accessing of processes. There's also a management area here where if you're a manager and that's been set up inside of TouchStone, you can view the processes that your employees are responsible for and keep training information. So all that happens here inside of management review. You also have access to what we call the public folder or the public processes. So this is the public processes, once they've been put in the public folder, and as part of the 4 key functions training, I'm going to show you how to do that. But once something has been marked and put in the public folder, it's available to everybody who has access to TouchStone. So anyone who logs in and goes to the dashboard, regardless of what kind of user access they have, they're always going to be able to see these public processes. So you want to reserve the public folder for processes that are company-wide information. So they're the types of processes that everyone in the company needs to use. So things like time management, employee handbook. So this gives those employees, every employee, access to these processes right here on the dashboard. In the upper right-hand corner here, there's a big button that says Resource Center. When you select the Resource Center, it'll always open in a second window. But this is a help center inside of TouchStone. Every user that logs in, regardless of their user access, will always have access to the Resource Center. So here inside the Resource Center, we have user guides right here. So this is a step-by-step set of instructions on everything inside of TouchStone. So you can sort through the topics or the main sections of TouchStone and look for what it is that you're trying to do. And when you click on one of those subject areas, you're going to see a step-by-step for how to do that, as well as screenshots that kind of show you how to do it. Oftentimes there's little videos that'll appear over here, which are like 5-10-minute videos on that particular subject. So if you get lost or forget something on the use or functionality of TouchStone, this is a great place to come. We also have a webinar section here. So if you select the webinars, this is the technical training webinars. So this was the series from the last series that happened. Now, sometimes this information kind of changes and a little bit different, but you can always access the last session's webinars here. And then as these happen, like we're number 1 right now, it's going to get replaced, the old one with the new one, unless I blow it, and then they won't replace it. Also under webinars, there's strategy webinars. And these are more like strategic things, like, how to use your organization strategy. Or this is called the 40-hour work year. It was one of our resellers who wrote a book about, time management and efficiency. So there's these different types of strategy webinars if you're interested in that. In the videos section, I'm not going to show everything in here, but I want to highlight one thing. There's getting started videos and how-to videos, but right here there's something called Process of the Week. So we have a process library inside of TouchStone, which I'm going to be showing you. But here you can get access to short little videos on the library processes. So if I hit strategy and management, which is guiding the business, you'll see a whole list of short little videos on how to use the strategic planning process, how to do the compensation planning, how to use job descriptions to manage employees. So these, again, are short videos which give you just a little bit of information on what that library process is about and how to use it. This is a knowledge library. There's a series of definitions in here. There's articles. There's access to our blogs. One more thing in here I want to show is the support area. So contact support is where you can go to get a hold of us rather quickly. You can also report a problem here. A problem or a feature request. Tell us about your experience or feature request. So if you're using TouchStone and you're thinking to yourself, I wish it did this, or why can't it do that, then always come here and take a minute to tell us, because the fact that TouchStone's a web tool means that we have releases at least quarterly. Sometimes you don't see them because they're kind of behind the scenes, but we can add things to TouchStone, and enough people want it, we track it, and then we'll add it. So make sure you let us know, what it is that you want. Also, Support Plus, you're all here, so you don't need to register for this, but I will point out TouchStone University. These are sessions that happen twice a month, I think, and they're shorter sessions. They're about half an hour, and they're just best practices with TouchStone. So that's the Resource Center. Also up here in the upper right-hand corner, we have this little icon, the person icon. This gives you the logout button and user settings. So through user settings, you can change your username and password right here. That's a quick way to do it. Logout is when you're done with TouchStone. It's always good internet protocol to log out of any web tool when you're finished with it for the day. TouchStone stays live or active on your computer for 3 hours with no activity. So what that means is if I come in the morning and I open up TouchStone and I just leave it and I'm not doing anything in it, 3 hours later it's going to time me out, which means when you go to click on something, you'll see the login screen again. If I am doing something in it within that 3 hours, well, then it's going to be another 3 hours. So it mimics software in that way, and we do that on purpose so that you don't have to be logging in all the time. But having said that, it's always a good idea to log out because you don't want someone else coming up to your computer and doing something when the system is live. So this is the logout button. The last icon here gives you access to account administration. So when I click user accounts or user settings or upgrade account, I go here and then it takes me to this, to the user settings. So here's where you create users for your system. It's also where you assign control panels. Anytime I click on anything here, you're going to see these little help buttons too, which give like a step-by-step for everything inside of this. I think the main thing that's important to know here is you can set up users for your system. You can restrict their access to read only or create, or you could make them administrators. But giving your employees their own usernames and passwords is a good idea because there's a lot of functionality inside of TouchStone that isn't usable if you don't have the users and the employees set up. Okay, so let's go to the 4 key functions. So the 4 key functions is one of the primary organization tools inside of TouchStone. And what happens here is this is where a list of all of your processes is kept. So at any point in time, if you want to find any process in TouchStone that you've entered, it's in one of these 4 functions in one place or another. So as we define it, guiding the business right here is for strategic and managerial processes. So these are like the higher level processes, things you'd use to guide the company and guide employees. That's why we call it guiding. This function is for getting the business, is for all of your processes related to getting new business. So marketing strategy, advertising, sales, all the processes related to how you get new business in the door. Doing the business is your operations or your service department. So this is delivering all of your products and services, everything related to that. Running the business is like the office processes. It's administration, human resources, HR, IT, everything. Another way to put it is all the support processes. So all the processes inside of this function support these other areas. So that's how we define the getting, doing, guiding, running. If you ever forget this, or this is the first time you've heard this, you can always find it in the Resource Center. So if you just search 4 key functions right here in this little search tab, it's going to pull up what is the 4 key functions, and then you can, be reminded of what that is. Having said all that, you can edit these titles if you want to. So if you don't like the getting, doing, guiding, running, I'll show you how you can edit and change these. What I would say is keep with the general themes. So don't call this advertising and then call this sales. Because if you do that, then you're going to run out of functions. So edit the titles to something simpler. If you just want to call this operations instead of doing, or you just want to call this marketing and sales, go ahead and do that. But remember to keep kind of the same themes. In these 4 key areas of any business, you can see everything that happens through this lens or through this funnel. So those 4 subjects exist in every business. So let's click one of the 4 functions. So when I select it, it takes me to this view, which first of all shows me the categories of work within this function. Now I know I'm on getting the business because I see it right here in the upper corner here. I also see that I am not in guiding because this can take me to guiding, this can take me to running, and this can take me to doing. And this shows me where I am. So inside of getting the business, we have these categories here called SubFunctions. So here's one for sales, here's one for advertising, estimating, sales management. And then we see the processes listed inside of those SubFunctions. So it's like a big outline. Here's the 4 key, then we drill down and we see the subcategories, and then we see the processes. So first thing I want to show you is if you do want to edit the function titles, right here is where you do that. So you just click this edit pencil, and then I can go and delete this, and I could just call this marketing and sales if I wanted to, and then I hit save. Now you can see from right here that this function title has changed. And if I go back here, I'm going to see it changed here. You can also change it back. Nothing's fixed forever. So if you wanted to change it back to getting, just edit pencil again and you can change it. Right above this edit pencil is this icon called SubFunctions. So the SubFunction drop down gives you all the functionality for the SubFunctions. So over the SubFunction icon, I can see add new SubFunction. I can go here to edit an existing SubFunction. I could delete a subfunction, and I can reorder a subfunction. So I'm going to add one here just so you see what that looks like. If I choose add, then I'm going to put in the name of the subfunction, and then I hit save. And if I scroll down here, you see it down here at the bottom. The subfunctions toggle from left to right. So this was the last one, or the marketing strategy is the last one, and then the new one appears at the bottom. Now, if I go back to subfunctions and I go reorder, then I'll see this new one. And if I select it, I can green arrow it up to the top and make it the top one, or adjust these any way that I want to. And then when I hit save, the order's changed, but again, it's toggling from left to right. So the purpose of the subfunctions is to organize your processes. That's the sole purpose. So it's to create categories so that your processes are in subject areas. The subfunctions are not position titles or people's names or anything related to a person. They're more the subject. So you'll notice here in marketing strategy, I have one for sales. That's a subject, everything related to how we sell. Then advertising, everything related to how we generate leads. Then marketing strategy, everything related to how we strategize and plan for marketing. So inside of this getting the business, these would be generally the ones that I would see. There needs to be a sales for sure, advertising for sure. Marketing strategy is a good one to have. Not all of us have time for that, but it's a good one to start thinking about. Sales management, that might be another one. If you do estimates or proposals and those are, you consider that to be a part of sales, then you might have an estimating subfunction. If you advertise and sell multiple products and you advertise and sell for those products in different ways, like you have commercial and residential, or two specific product sets which are sold to different customers in different ways, then you might have different subfunctions for that. So I might have an advertising / residential, and then another subfunction for advertising / commercial. So this is up to you how you, in the end, decide how to create your subfunctions, but just think of them as a way to organize your processes. I'm going to go to guiding the business now. In guiding the business, some typical subfunctions would be strategy. This is all the strategic business strategy processes. Training, employee training. Employee management, definitely a must. So these are managerial processes, employee management processes that are for every employee. That's why it's not just in sales or just in doing the business. It's for every employee, so we have it in guiding the business. Board of directors or board meeting processes. Even if you don't have a board of directors, start thinking about something like this, because getting your advisors together, at least planning and talking about the business every year is a good idea, also for corporate compliance. So it doesn't mean you can't have more, but these are the 4 that I would generally see inside of guiding the business. So let's go to running next. So now we're in running the business. Here, subfunctions I would generally see are admin or administration. So these are all the office processes. Human resources. So these are the policy processes. The getting new employee processes. We keep this over in the running the business area and not in guiding, because this is more the policy side of having employees. Finance, definitely a must. This is kind of a neat thing to do. So you have finance, which is like the bookkeeping processes, and then you have financial management, which is like the higher level processes, like cash flow planning, budgeting. IT, so computer processes. This could be the how-tos of your CRM, of your financial software. It could be processes related to your computer hardware and software, backups, things like that, fixing those systems when they break down. So these are some good ideas, and these, I think, for most businesses are pretty generic. Inside of doing the business is where it gets, it gets very industry specific. So depending on what type of business you do, that would then dictate what kind of sub-functions you would have. So if you're a service business, then you could have a client service process or sub-function, or a service sub-function, maybe service development sub-function. If you're a production company, then you'd have a production sub-function, maybe a production management or operations management. If you deal with materials, inventory, you could have material control, inventory control. So think about what happens in your operations and what the kind of key areas of that are, and then those are your sub-functions. If you're struggling with what sub-functions are good for your industry, you can always send me a message or send it through the Help Center, and we can give you some ideas, because we've seen every industry inside of TouchStone and every type of sub-function. So that's sub-functions. Right to the right of the Edit Function Title button, you see this little arrow that is Print. So this is the export arrow. You're going to see that everywhere inside of TouchStone. There's pretty much the same functionality underneath it in every area that you would see it. You can print this directly to your printer. You can export it to Word, to a PDF, or you can email it. So when I say it, I'm meaning what's behind me on the screen, so this. So whenever you see the export arrow, it's going to print what is there that you see visually on the screen. Okay, so sub-functions. Now let's talk about processes. So you see lots of processes already added to my sub-functions here. When you want to add a process, you go right here where it says Add New Process. So I click this icon, up comes the Add New Process window. I type in the name of the process. A good protocol is to capitalize the first letter of every word, except for if it's like an and or an of. You don't necessarily need to do that, or a the. I did capitalize this the, but the first letter of every word. And then I hit save. I didn't choose a sub-function, so it defaulted to the first one. So that's this one right here. It's down here at the bottom. If you put a process in the wrong sub-function, everything's drag and drop here. So I'm just pulling this around, and then I let go, and I can put it in whatever sub-function I want. But initially, when you go Add New Process, you do have the ability to hit this drop down and put it in the correct sub-function to begin with. So you'll notice with my process titles that they're short, specific titles. So this is client satisfaction. This is customer complaints. They're usually no more than 3 words. So when you're thinking of your process titles, think short, specific titles. Each word, first letter of each word capitalized, so it reads like a title. And I just emphasize this point because when people are adding the process titles, some people, I've seen them do them all caps, then I've seen some do them all lowercase, and then some doing a mixture of both. Some even capitalizing the first letter of the word and then not the rest. So you can obviously do whatever you want, but I think it's good practice, or get good practice inside of TouchStone to kind of think of a protocol, a way to do it. And you're best off thinking of what the normal convention for that is, not what you like. And the normal convention is, with a title, you capitalize the first letter of each word, because you want everything to look the same. You don't want whoever is doing it to dictate, how it looks, and to have people doing it differently. So when you're adding your processes, think about the name specifically. Also think about what sub-function it goes in. Then consider what the purpose of that process is. So let's click this one. What I'm referring to is this field right here. So this is called the objective field. And when you're adding your process titles, it's a good idea to then click that process and immediately go here and just define it. Resolve and learn from each customer complaint through efficient follow-up and the distribution of information. So this is telling me, first of all, what's the purpose of this process. It's also telling me what the scope of it is. So I know that what happens in this process is that the customer complaint is resolved and that I'm distributing any relevant information efficiently. So don't underestimate the value of this when you're first adding your process titles, because what tends to happen is you'll add a process title and then you go back and look at that later and you don't remember what you were thinking when you put that in. Or even worse than that, you may add the process title, go back to start documenting the process, start building a work plan, say, like this one, and then you're describing way more than what the original objective was for. So it goes off in a tangent. So you're doing the customer complaint, and then suddenly you're into invoicing, and then suddenly you're going into the warranty issue, and then it comes back to customer service, and you just wander around with the steps of the process. So if you consider what the scope of the process is first, then that'll really help you with the documentation once you get there. Another thing to consider when you're adding processes is whether that process is going to have multiple work plans within it, so multiple things that happen. So this is a bit of an art, but I'm going to try to explain it to you just by showing you some examples. So you'll see this is the material control subfunction. Within this, we have these 5 things that happen. So there's one process in here called shipping and receiving. It's related to material control. If I had made the process material control and not the subfunction, then these could potentially be 5 work plans within that one process called material control. So making the decisions like this are important when you're first listing out your processes. So here again, I'll show you some examples. Let's go to running the business. This is a straightforward example that most people understand. Here's a subfunction called finance. So I've thought to myself, what are all the processes, the work that happens within finance? One of those work items or processes is called accounts payable. If I click accounts payable, inside of accounts payable, there are all of these sub-processes, you might say, or we call them work plans, for everything related to accounts payable. So there's a work plan on how to make check deposits, and then there's a step-by-step for that. There's a work plan on creating invoices, and a step-by-step for that. There's a work plan on special invoices. So these are all have their own individual tasks and expectations and results that they achieve. Everything here is related to accounts payable. So these are all work plans inside of it. Now, this is a good way to think about it, like what are all of these simple activities that occur related to accounts payable, and then putting them in as work plans. Now, having said that, you don't have to do it like this. I could have a process for every single one of these. I could have 6 processes. But what occurs when you do that is it just makes more processes on your 4 functions list. So rather than having, 7 processes here under finance, if I took all the work plans out of accounts payable and made them their own processes, then I might have 20 processes under finance. It's just more to deal with. It's just more processes. It's just more on your list. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that other than the fact that it just creates more. I like condensing things and putting like workflows into like subject areas, like this example of accounts payable. So think about that when you're documenting your processes. Here's another example, recruiting. So if I click recruiting, everything I need related to recruiting is under here. So how to prepare for recruiting, all the documents related to recruiting. Interviewing is the same thing. Here's interviewing. So everything related to how to interview a candidate, all of the questions, how to prepare for it, how to do it, is all here under interviewing. If you are hearing me say this and you're thinking about your 4 functions and you're wanting to combine things more, if you click a process and then you go to a work plan, you can take this work plan out of this process and move it into another one using this icon right here. So if you want to combine things and you've already created some documentation, remember this tool. It will allow you to take any tool out of one process and move it into another. So that's how you would combine or pull apart things. So for those of you this makes sense to, and for new users it might be a little too complicated at this point, but for some of you it will make sense, so I'm going to say it anyway. Every process on the 4 functions is linked to a job description. That's how we create the job descriptions on the org chart. We link these processes. So if I have a process like this called accounts payable, and I've got accounts receivable specialist, and I've got an accounts payable person and a controller, so I've got 4 or 5 boxes on my org chart for the whole accounting department. If I have one position who just does the check deposits, and I've got another position who does the invoices, then that might be a reason why I'd want to separate these work plans, because you can't link work plans to positions on the org chart. You link the whole process. So in that situation, I could link just the things related to deposits to that one position and just things related to invoices to the other. That would be a reason to separate this accounts payables process. Okay. So let's go back to the 4 functions here. I'm just going to go back to marketing and sales. So that's add new process. Another way to get processes into your account is to use our library. So every function, the getting, doing, guiding, running, all have their own library. So here I'm inside of the getting the business function. And here I'm seeing processes related to getting the business. So that's what I mean by every function has its own library. If I was in running the business and I went to add from process library, I would see things related to human resources, finance, HR. If I was in guiding, I would see things related to strategy and employee management, board of directors. So make sure you look in all 4 of the 4 key functions at the specific libraries. So here in the in the library, there are processes that I can download. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. My voice keeps going in and out. So here are things related to marketing, strategy, sales, and advertising. Most of these library processes, I'd say probably 80% of them have some content in them. So they've got some documentation that you can use. You can edit it and kind of make it your own. Some of them are just suggested titles. So how you'll know if something has content in it is when you copy it over. So I'm going to take this process right here called cold calling. I can tell at the top here, tell TouchStone which subfunction to put it in. So I'll put it in advertising. And then I hit save. If this process comes across in blue, then it's got some content in it. So here it is right here in blue. If it comes across red, like this one, then it's just a suggested title. So that's how you know. So if it comes across in blue, when you select it, you can look over here to the left and you can see the content that's in this process. So I could look at the work plan here and see this kind of step-by-step for how to generate new leads from a call list. Now, when you pull a library process, the first thing you should do is look at it. So when I mean look at it is look at the work plans and the checklists and the documents and the forms and all that, and just ask yourself, is this something that you could edit and use? Is this even in the ballpark of how you would do cold calling? If the answer to that is no, then I would suggest you delete it. It's difficult to start editing something and making it your own when 90% of it is wrong. So delete the library process if it is not going to be something that you can edit easily and make your own. If it is something you can edit easily and make your own, then keep it. If there is something in the process that you like, but most of it you don't like, remember you can take a tool out of it and move it into another process. So using this icon right here. So if I thought this cold call system process was not right for me, the work plans anyway, but I was looking at this document right here, or even the custom form here on call tracking, and I thought, oh, this I might use this. You could go in and just delete these work plans and edit the title, or you could take this cold calling sheet, and with this icon right here, you could move it into another process. So here I'm just seeing these are all the subfunctions. So I would look for the process I want to move this into. When I found it, I would choose it and then hit save. And then you'll see that custom form is gone from this process and it's moved into the other one. So let's go back. After you've moved what you want out of it, then take the process and delete it. So to delete a process, you just take it up here and you hit this delete, wait for it to turn green. See how it's turning green? And then I let go and then I hit delete. Now when I delete a library process, it puts it back into the library. So if you go back here to add from process library, you see the cold calling process again. These others are grayed out because they've already been added to my system. So you can't add it twice. But once you delete it, it's then available in the library again. You can go and download it again. So scrutinize these library processes. Don't just go select all and take them all. I mean, you can do that. But if you do that, then make sure you look through each one and really ask yourself, first of all, is this something that I can edit and make my own quite easily? It's more than maybe 50% good, then leave it. If it's not something you can really edit and make your own, but you want to keep something that's inside of it, so you like the video or you like one of the work plans, then move that tool out and then delete it. Or the third is if it's just completely not anything that you feel like you would use anytime soon, then go ahead and delete it. And just remember that you can always go back to the library and get it again. A good way to think about that is if it's not something you're going to edit and use and implement within the next 6 months, say, I'd suggest that you delete it for now and then go back and get it later. There are a lot of strategic type processes in the library, or some. And it's an exciting thing to pull down into your account and think, oh, I'm going to do this because it sounds really great. But if it's just not the priority for the next 6 months, say, then just remove it for now. And the reason is the more you have in your system, especially the more you have that you're not committed to documenting, it's just like the more you have. It just makes it more complicated and more overwhelming when you go to look at it. So have what's in here, some things that are of the utmost of importance to you. I have a question. This seems like a good time. This is it better to list the processes first on a separate document stating the objective, and then I'm going to paraphrase this, and then go in and add them under the subfunctions? When there are too many processes listed as subfunction, it gets overwhelming. Then he's saying I just covered the question. So it's a very good question, and what I would just reiterate what I said about that. I think there's this tendency, well, I'll say something new about it and then I'll reiterate. There's this tendency to want to do things outside of TouchStone and then put it in. And I see that a lot with the documentation. So somebody, rather than documenting this work plan right inside of TouchStone, they're going to do it in Word because that's what they're comfortable with, and then they'll go back and cut and paste it into TouchStone. Well, you're just creating more work. That employee is creating more work, and so are you. It's duplicating the efforts. The TouchStone templates are really meant to drive the documentation. They're really meant to push the person doing it into a step by step and format that correctly. The thinking becomes more formatted as well. You tend to, when you're writing out things in Word, you tend to think in like long sentences and long paragraphs of information, rather than doing it like this, where you're thinking bullets and sub-bullets. So get your employees used to and get used to yourself doing it right inside of TouchStone. And it's just overcoming that learning curve. And TouchStone's very user-friendly. It's not that different from just typing something into Word, especially if you're building it in columns and rows and doing forms and whatever else people are doing in Word. So build it right in TouchStone and push your people to do that. You're not going to make any mistakes in the system. You can edit and change everything. There's no critical error that's going to occur. So I would say the same thing about the 4 functions list. Do it in TouchStone. Brainstorm it in TouchStone. Look at it here and then say, should I combine those or should I move this? Everything can be moved and organized in a different way. I can take processes like this one and I could move it to this function if I wanted to, just by dropping it. And now I'm seeing the sub-functions inside of running the business, so I could move it there. So it's almost in a way easier than cutting pasting from a Word document into different sections of a Word document. Here, it's like you're seeing the list and then, you can move it around quite easily. Okay, so we covered the process library. Again, remember every function, getting, doing, guiding, running, has its own library. If you download a library process and you're looking at it and wondering, oh, this looks good, but how do I use this? Remember to go to the Help Center and look under that Process of the Week header, because not every process, but a lot of them have like little short 10-minute videos on how to use those library processes. All right, so a few more things here about these lists. You saw me pulling and dragging and dropping like this. Remember, you can do that to reorder. You'll see I've got the color coding organized in a certain way. So this shows you what the color coding means. In a nutshell, red is empty. There's nothing in it. It's just a title. So if I click this, there's nothing here. It's just a title right now. The minute I put something in here, so I type in new work plan and I hit create, this is a good thing to know. This is telling me that this title already exists. So if you ever see this, it's stopping you from putting something in redundant. So I'm going to choose a random number, hit create. So now there's a work plan in here. So theoretically, I've started this process. I'm starting to document it. So if I go back now here to advertising and we look at this website maintenance process, it's blue now. So that means I've started it. It's in process. When I'm finished with it, if I click the same process and fill in this button right here, process documentation completed, now if we go back to advertising, it's going to be black. And that means it's complete. It's done. It's done. What's a good idea once something is marked as complete? Drag it to the bottom. This is while you're developing. And then back here at the top, this is the next one you're working on. When this is complete, drag it to the bottom, and then that's the one at the top, the next one you're working on. You can also do this on job descriptions. You can reorganize the processes once the job descriptions are built. So that's the color coding. If I want to put something in the public folder, and that's this folder here on the dashboard I was talking about in the beginning, if I select the process Right under process documentation completed is where I would put something in the public folder. And if I click this, now it's in the public folder. If we go over here to the dashboard, you see the Google Analytics process right here. It's now been put in the public folder. If I go back and uncheck this, it's going to take it out of the public folder. So one click is in, one click is out. You can always change your mind. But if we go back to the 4 functions list here, if the process is marked with a P like this, it's just an indicator to you that it's in the public folder. Once a process is completed, so I'm going to complete it just by hitting this, which turns it black, and then we'll go back to advertising. Now you see it with a green check. So that's what these 2 little icons are for. Green check, or the P, means it's in the public folder. When you've marked a process as complete, and I don't think I covered this, I'll just say it again, you can also unmark it as complete. So if we have fully documented the Google Analytics process and then, Google comes across with something different, we want to change it. As a manager, I might go here and uncheck it as complete. And it just might be a reminder to me that now I need to update and change it. It's changed significantly. It's not complete anymore. So you uncheck the box. Now it's blue. And everything that's blue still needs to be documented. And so then this is a sign to me that I need to work on that. So that's the whole color coding system. This color coding follows every process throughout TouchStone. So when this is linked to a job description, it'll be blue on the job description until it's completed. Also in the dashboard, when you see it on the dashboard, it'll be blue until it's completed. Let's see. Someone else has a question. Do you recommend having your employees access processes in TouchStone? Absolutely, without a doubt. The more you can get your employees accessing the process in TouchStone, the more useful they're going to be to you. Now, there are, depending on different types of businesses, I'm sure that there are some situations where employees don't even have access to a phone, maybe, let alone a computer. And in those situations, you may need to export information so that so those employees can have access to it. There's a quick way to do that. So right here on the organization chart, if I had this warehouse associate, say, or this apprentice technician, and they just don't even have access to a phone, which I think is pretty rare nowadays, but if that's the case, I can go up to this button here and I can print their operating manual. And that exports everything, including all the tools inside of every process, to a Word document, and then I could save it as a PDF and give it to them. But I would suggest that the majority of the time, employees with their phones, even if they don't have access to a computer, can be accessing their processes in TouchStone electronically. And that happens through the dashboard. So if I'm logged in, if I've been set up as a user in TouchStone, and I'm the manager of marketing and sales here, when I log into TouchStone, even with my phone, I can go to this, what's my control panel on the dashboard, and I click it, and now I can see all the processes I'm responsible for. Now, we're going to be talking more about this next week, but all of these processes are derived from the job description for the manager of marketing and sales. So here on the org chart, whatever processes are on this box is what I'm going to see as the manager of marketing and sales. So if I go to the dashboard here and I click this again, if I'm the manager of marketing and sales and I want to remind myself of how to do a performance review, or I'm having an employee with a problem and I need to do coaching and training, or I have a real problem and I need to write them up, anything I need to remember how to do, I can go here to TouchStone to view it. In addition, if there are things I need to complete as I do this process, that all happens in TouchStone as well. So these written warning forms, like here's a form right here with the employee's name, and I save this back to TouchStone, and it's all done electronically in TouchStone. How can we make processes read-only to make sure no user changes the process? So that's easy inside of TouchStone. So first of all, everything here on the dashboard is read-only. So nobody can edit or change anything from the dashboard. It's always read only. Having said that, up here in account administration, so here's the user accounts. This is where you set access. So if I have Sam here, or let's choose John. I have John, and let's say he is a technical employee. I want him to be able to access his processes for training purposes, but I don't want him to edit or change anything else inside of TouchStone. I would go up here to user access, and I would give him, I'm just going to undo this so it's blank. I would give him read-only access for the positions that I want him to have access to. I'm going to remove these just so, again, so it's blank. He had, this particular example user had some access set, so I'm just going to remove it all just so it looks blank so you understand what it looks like when you go to it. So I hit John. This is the org chart. TouchStone gives access by position. So if I choose the position that John's responsible for that I want to give him access to, like apprentice technician, I click it. I can give him read-only access, and then I hit update. So now he can only access the processes on this job description, and he can only read them and print them. That's all he can do. He can't go to edit mode. He can't change anything. When he goes to the org chart, all he's going to see is the org chart with one box illuminated called Apprentice Tech, and that's the only one he can go to. All the rest will be grayed out. He could go to the 4 functions, but everything is grayed out except for the processes that he has access to. So all that's controlled here in the user access area. You have to set your employees up as individual users. So if that's been a stumbling block for anyone because you don't want to upgrade your account, just give us a call. And depending on your situation, we'll either give you free users or we'll give you, deep discounts for users. And the reason we do that is it helps us and it helps you. Ultimately, it helps you and that helps us. So what I mean is if more people are using TouchStone, more of your employees are in it, more people are being trained in it, more people are accessing it, that means your processes are more valuable. They're helping your business. They're helping everyone in your business, which means TouchStone is really working for you. Your processes are working for you. Therefore, you keep your subscription, and that helps us. So ask us for free users if you need them. Okay, so this is the 4 key functions. And there's technically how to do things in the 4 functions that we went over. And there's also strategically things to be thinking about and how to do things in the 4 functions. I think as far as the strategic nature goes, the most difficult thing is kind of deciding what is a process, what is a work plan within a process, what is a subfunction like this, and what is a process, and then what are work plans inside of each process as opposed to being processes. So we have a lot of experience with this. For some of you, this might be really straightforward, just come up with your process titles. For those of you who are struggling with it, schedule a support call with us. And in about 10 or 15 minutes, we can shape up your 4 functions for you and really direct you in how to do it well. If you're brand new to TouchStone and you're just starting your 4 functions, don't do it on a separate piece of paper. Dig into TouchStone. If you're a larger company, sit with the sales team, sit with your service department, open up TouchStone, go to the doing the business area, say to them, what are the categories of work here? What is the work that happens? Start listing it out right inside of TouchStone. Get feedback. Send an email out to your key employees and say, make me a list of everything that you do. Have them email that back to you. So this first effort is just to make a very succinct, clear, good list of all of your processes. So again, if you're new to TouchStone, this should be your first order of business. Make this list clean and accurate. Focus on the top 20% of everything that happens. Make it simple. And again, if you need help, let us know because support is always free, and we'll sit with you and help you sort through any issues you're having with creating your 4 functions. Next week, we're going to be talking about organization strategy and using the org chart. It's going to take about 10 minutes for me to show you how to use the org chart. It's not that hard of a tool to use inside of TouchStone. But what's more to the point, what's the most important thing is how to build a good organization chart, how to think through the departments, how to think through the positions you need, how to consider what your vision is, what your strategic target is, and then build it for the future so it becomes a tool that helps you grow. So having said that, for any of you who are up for it, in our process library, there is a process called strategic target development right here. If you download this from the library, there are some tools within it which explain how to create what we call a strategic target. Right here. So this is an example of one. It's one page, just a one-page vision. Where's my business going? Where will I be in 5 years? And you just create this simple, can even be a list. So if you don't have something like this, challenge yourself to maybe go and download this process and do it. Create yourself just a little simple strategic target. Think about what your vision for the future is. Where is your business going? How are you going to get there? What your sales are going to be in 5 years, what kind of structure your business needs. Go in and answer the strategic target questions that are in this process, and just, even if it's just questions and answers. If you do that by next Thursday, then when we get to the organization chart discussion, it will help you understand what I'm saying about building a future chart, and it will also help you to build the future chart. So consider doing that before our next meeting. And when we meet next week, it's going to be all about org chart and org strategy.